Hi, I'm Beth.
And I'm Courtney.
Welcome to Dead Reckoning, the podcast where death isn't the end of the story.
And this week we are talking about City Cemetery.
Yay!
A subject near and dear to both of our hearts. You will often hear people say that there are only two cemeteries in San Francisco. Two cemeteries left in San Francisco, Mission Dolores and the National Cemetery at the Presidio. But that is not true. There is one large graveyard here with up to 20,000 people buried in it, but it's no longer marked. It's a golf course now. We are talking, of course, about City Cemetery, which was built on the site of what is now the Legion of Honor and Lincoln Park Golf Course. Did you guys know that? Did everyone out there know that? When you're out there golfing at Lincoln Park?
When you're visiting the artwork at the Legion of Honor Museum.
20,000 dead people.
I see people posting all the time, like pictures of them at the Legion of Honor, and I'm like,
Are you tempted? Because every time someone posts a fucking golf shot from, like, literally it's any course in the city, because I don't know the difference between them, I'll be like, are you at Legion of Honor? Are you at Lincoln Park? Did you know? And everyone's like, yeah, you've told us multiple times. We know.
Well, and not to sidetrack us already, but like there's a golf course in Colma that for a time also had an indigent burial ground underneath it. So like it somehow golf courses
and also Lincoln
together.
Parks, because Lincoln Park in Chicago also has an unmarked cemetery under it. Yeah. So
these are all clues for cemetery hunters.
All right.
Anyway,
well,
please continue.
Okay, right off the top, this is my favorite cemetery. Beth, I don't know if it's yours or not. I know it's special to you, but
yeah, Yerba Buena is also really important to me, just because it's even less known. But also, I mean, this one too.
Yeah, City Cemetery is key to a lot of both of our work about, like, who do we remember? How do we remember? Whose history gets advertised? Whose gets covered over? All those themes you can find in the story of City Cemetery. So let's get into it. City Cemetery, it was also called Golden Gate Cemetery at one point. That is because...
Yeah, that is the official name of the cemetery. It's just nobody calls it that.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know which one was official.
Yeah, the term city cemetery is actually a generic term to just mean a municipally run cemetery. But yeah, nobody called it
Golden Gate
Cemetery. Even the newspapers of the time usually just called it City Cemetery.
It is located at the far northwest corner of the city. I'll give you guys the coordinates if you're not from here and you don't know where the Legion of Honor and Lincoln Park are. It is roughly Clement Street and 33rd and the ocean, because it's like in the corner facing the Golden Gate. Like right now we have the Golden Gate Bridge there, but that Golden Gate is actually the term for the mouth of the bay. The mouth, that's so gross. It's this term, the name where the Pacific Ocean meets the San Francisco Bay. That's called the Golden Gate. Okay, so that predates the Golden Gate Bridge.
I think mouth is the official term. I think mouth is
the official disgusting
term. So you're
term.
Not being weird.
I don't know why that grosses me out, but it's like, really? Okay, so it was opened in 1868. I'm going to give everybody a quick reminder of the San Francisco timeline. Okay, so San Francisco established 1849. We all know that, right? 49ers. 1850, Yerba Buena Cemetery is established. We covered that way back in episode 1 of the podcast. You want to go back and listen to that if you haven't already. That was our first municipal burial ground. By 1858, Yerba Buena is full. There's a lot of people being buried in there. It's only like 10 years. And the city is encroaching on it. The city is moving west, right? So it initially was settled on the bay side along the waterfront, and it is moving west towards the ocean. And Yerba Buena, where it is the site of modern day, roughly, Civic Center. And they want that land. That land is becoming valuable. They need it. The city is moving that direction. The city raised a bond to move the bodies, but even then, they knew it was for $10,000 that it wasn't enough. So not everybody was moved. About 1,800 people total were moved from Yerba Buena Cemetery. And some of them, right, not all of them. I'm going to keep saying this, go back to episode 1, you're going to find out what happened to the rest of them. Spoiler alert, like a lot of them are still there. Some of them, 267 for sure that we know of, were moved to city cemetery.
Yeah, those are the ones that some record has the names of those people that were moved, but many were already in unmarked graves. So more were moved, but we don't know them for sure or how many.
You know, in 1906, we had the earthquake and the fire, and a lot of documentation for these. And anything that happened before then was lost in that fire. So we know for sure some people were moved from Yerba Buena to city cemetery. Yeah, so 1868, it's open. It's beginning with some of the bodies that were moved from the prior municipal burial ground. Let's discuss. So I know from your Yerba Buena episode that, and if this is too much in the weeds for you guys, I'm sorry, but this is two huge nerds talking on air about cemetery removals in San Francisco. We know for sure that there was like a burial ground in North Beach, and some of those people, when they dug that up and they moved some of those people to Yerba Buena, it's possible, is it not, that they moved some of those also to city cemetery, which would mean those bodies got moved like at least twice.
Yeah, it is very likely because
Likely. I'm upgraded from possible. Go on, Beth.
so the people that were moved from North Beach to Yerba Buena were buried in kind of a vault altogether.
Vault is a nicer word than you used in episode 1, where I believe you referred to it as a pit.
Pit is another word for it, but I think there was like some brickwork around it or something.
Okay.
But anyway, there are descriptions. There are descriptions of uncovering that section in Yerba Buena when they were doing these removals in the 1860s. So that suggests to me that most or all of them were then moved on to city cemetery.
Interesting.
And those were some of the ones that probably would not have been identified because the way that they removed the bodies from North Beach, they were just piled into like a wagon without their head, their stones
that's
or anything.
That's kind of the story of the like, they're just moving these people from site to site to site. Mm-hmm. You'll find out that, well, let me not get ahead of myself.
No spoilers, Courtney.
1868. Here we are. We've got these people. We're starting the cemetery with the remains from the old cemetery. Like Yerba Buena, a city cemetery was a municipal burial ground. That basically means that it was run by the city, and people who couldn't afford their own burial in a private cemetery, those people were buried here. It also meant that anyone who was a religious or ethnic minority who might not be welcome at the other cemeteries, they were buried here. And also potentially some things like suicides. Beth, you have a story in your book about someone who died by suicide who was then buried at city cemetery because other cemeteries wouldn't take him, especially like I know Catholic cemeteries and Jewish cemeteries, it was an issue to be buried on consecrated ground if you had died by suicide. So those kind of people are also there.
There is another man who died, who was buried in the cemetery. They found a bullet in his skull, and they were able to correlate this to, I believe, a doctor who came to San Francisco and ended his own life. And so, yeah, I mean, it sort of supports the idea that at least some of the suicides wound up here. Not all of them, but some did.
It is the situation where the private cemeteries can take who they want, and the public cemetery has to take everybody. There are also some smaller cemeteries, or there are plots run by smaller benevolent or ethnic societies at the city cemetery site. There's like pretty much like people from all over the world. We have Greco-Russian, which I think means Orthodox.
Yeah, I think so too. And if you read my book, San Francisco's Forgotten Cemeteries, this is not a
I
blatant
forgot to
plug,
plug
but
it.
there was another.
Hold on. Before you go on, everybody, this episode is brought to you by Beth's book, San Francisco's Forgotten Cemeteries, A Buried History, which was published a few years ago. We will drop a link in the notes. Go on, Beth.
Oh, thank you. There was an Orthodox Greco-Russian cemetery associated with one of the, I'm going to say church because I'm forgetting the correct term, but I have a story about this. It was near Lone Mountain, and they had their original religious leader went back to Russia, and they had like a lapse, and some of the church members started selling off the land for their little churchyard cemetery.
Okay.
Like with bodies still in it.
That fits right in. These people fit right in. True San Francisco pioneers. Yeah.
So that one, I believe, closed, and then they had to find another place.
City
so they eventually wound up at City Cemetery.
So there were also burial grounds or plots for Jewish burials. There were French, German, Italian, Japanese, Scandinavian, Slavic, Illyric. I hope I said that right. And burial ground for Black Freemasons. So all the colors of Benetton here. And then also,
I mean, that's an interesting little note, actually, because the Masons had their own cemetery.
Not for the Black Masons,
Freemasons, right? I guess, had to have it.
Yeah. Surprise, surprise.
Not for you.
So, also there was a large Chinese section of the burial ground. Now, it was run by the Chinese community associations, and they actually built a funerary monument, a funerary arch on the site that's still here today. So you can actually still see this is a remnant of the burial ground. It's called the Kong Chao Temple. And Beth will talk a little bit more about that at the end of the episode. But what was happening with the Chinese section is that most of the bones were meant to be repatriated to China. So people would be buried there for a temporary period of time and then removed and sent back home. So, but they were still burying people there.
One other thing that I was reminded reviewing all of this stuff is that the Kongqiao temple itself was probably the altar where if they were going to do any rituals around the burial of the dead, that would be there. And there was actually like a funerary furnace, and I'm not even sure if that was for human remains or just for like the offerings.
It was for offerings and clothing. So we'll get to that. The route to get to City Cemetery was called the Point Lobos Toll Road, which is now Geary Street. So that's kind of cool. But it does mean that all those, like people going out there would have to take horse carriage out there.
Yeah, and pay a toll to the city. Yeah, the toll road was opened and operated by the city, and I can't remember what the toll was. It was, like a couple of bucks in 1860s dollars.
Yeah, so that was kind of like the way out there, because at the time there was, like I said, there was not a lot out there. This was like kind of the wild lands of San Francisco out by the ocean out there. When they built this, they really did think like they're never going to need this land. They thought, let's put this cemetery. We already moved a bunch of cemeteries because we need the land. Let's put it way out in like not the worst part of town. That was Potrero Hill, as we know. Listen to the Pest House episode. But the most remote corner of the universe in San Francisco. And of course, it's hilarious to think about that now, because now like fucking Seacliff is out there, right? These are like multi-million-dollar oceanfront mansions. At the time, they were like, nobody wants to go out there, man. It's cold. It's like, it's not nice. It was basically a windswept bluff with sandy soil, our favorite sandy soil, which blows off and reveals coffins, as we learned in episode 1. So I want to put you back to 1866. And I'm going to have Carolyn cue us some music for this. But I want you to imagine what it was like back then, 1868. You're out on this windswept bluff, okay? You guys have been out there. You know how the weather is. It's freezing, it's foggy, it's windy. You're like right out there, almost to the ocean, right? Facing the ocean. And I want you to imagine being there and seeing these rows of rotting wooden headboards with illegible numbers on them. Those were the graves. Some of them are tipping over, some of them are split. They're not in great condition, but there's thousands of them, right, spread out over this bluff. There is long, dry grass tangled up over these sunken rows of graves. There is no trees or a few trees. There's just some old scrub around there. The ground is sodden. It's sinking when you step in it. It's full of holes and hazards. The fence is old and falling apart and neglected and rotten. There is trash strewn around. People were probably hanging out here, but also there's probably grave robbing going on out here. Even out here with these poor graves, that was a thing that we know from previous episodes was happening. And there is smoke coming from the Kong Chao monument or temple monument, and it's filling the air from the Chinese custom of burning the clothes of the deceased. So they are burning offerings, but they also burn the clothes. So it's very smoky. And it's not nice incense smoke. It's burning clothes, right? Doesn't smell good. The only person you see in this smoky, foggy, windswept hellscape is an old grave digger leaning on his shovel. That's my little ode to City Cemetery. I got all this information from this great site called SF Genealogy, which I'll post in the comments. But those are from contemporary descriptions of the time. That's what it looked like out there. That's what the graveyard was like. And it was not nice. It wasn't Seacliff. It wasn't Lincoln Park Golf Course.
It says a lot about who wound up being buried here at the
100%.
time.
It says a lot. Nobody was there caring for those graves. This is not the garden cemetery of Victorian era America, right? This is where they send the poor people to kind of be buried in obscurity, thinking they'll never need this land. And no one ever goes out there, so why bother planting it, keeping it up? By 1883, there were 18,000 people buried there. Over time, 29,000 people were buried here over the course of when the cemetery was in operation. By the early 1900s, when it was kind of finally closed for good, estimates are that there are probably 20,000 bodies left in there. This is because some were removed, which we'll talk about in a minute, and also because up to about 6,300 Chinese burials were removed, like a large chunk of that. Those bones we know for sure were removed and repatriated. In total, 11,000 of them we know for sure were buried indigent here, buried at the city's expense.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add at this particular point that the Potter's Field, which is one of the names for this indigent burial section, the Potter's Field is where the Legion of Honor is now. Like it's in the middle of that plot.
Surprise. Shocking.
Surprise.
Don't worry, we're going to talk about the Legion of Honor in a minute. Just like Yerba Buena, around the turn of the century, the city is closing in, okay? In like 30 years, the city has made it out to the western part. Civilization, development is coming, which means the real estate companies are coming. The real estate lobby groups are here and they're ready and they want that land. And it is valuable land, and they are beginning to see the potential for developing on that land near with these beautiful views. And, I assume the toll roads are built up more. The city is moving that direction. And no one wants to live near this janky old cemetery, right? That smells like burning clothes and is full of like rotten wooden headboards. They know they can't sell the land if that cemetery is there. So this begins the process of closing the cemetery. In 1887, the city recommends that burials stop at the location. In 1891, the US government buys the land. I'm not going to get into that because it's really boring. In 1896, Mayor Adolf Sutro, who Beth reminds me lived right next door to the cemetery, it didn't want it there, also has huge real estate holdings out there, right? He signs an order banning further burials at City Cemetery. And then in 1908, which is almost 10 years later, I'll add, the city's health commissioner asked the board to remove the graves at the cemetery, to start a removal process. As far as we can tell, the only thing they did was send a notice to the organizations that own the smaller cemeteries and the smaller plots to remove their dead. Beth tells me that really only the Jewish plot was removed, which was about maybe 1,200 graves. Right, Beth?
Yeah, there were notices in the newspaper too that the city had gone to all this effort to like evict, quote unquote, evict the cemeteries in San Francisco. And that happened. Like we talked about, 150,000 graves were moved out of the city. But in this case, they were just very open about the fact that they were just going to remove the markers and just do something else with the land without really bothering to move anybody.
That's exactly what they did.
Yeah.
We even have a quote from an archaeological find in the 1990s where the archaeologist basically says, it's just like Poltergeist. They just kicked over the headboards. Like they just took them down and pretended like there was no graveyard there.
Yeah.
In 1909, the land was dedicated for a park. That's where we get Lincoln Park. And as early as 1902, people are golfing out there. Before it was officially a golf course, people already started golfing out there, but it was officially established as a golf course in 1917.
Yeah, the city's golfers had been kind of begging for a place to play golf, and they just sort of took over once this place closed as a cemetery. They were like, we're taking this land for us.
We're going to, this is now a recreation spot for us.
There's an interesting complication here that, I mean, you say golf course, you assume like country club golf course. This is actually a city run public golf course. Anybody can go play. It's relatively affordable. You go out there on a Tuesday morning and you just see like regular dudes golfing. So in that way, like it became a different kind of accessible, affordable space for people who wanted to do this activity. But also it's a golf course on a cemetery.
Yeah, I'm normally like down for citizens claiming their land and doing their stuff, but this is kind of funny. I'm sorry. Okay, you see them out there like with their bags, like just kicking over headstones. Just kidding. They didn't do that. I'm not slandering the golfers of 1902. Instead, we're going to talk about the Legion of Honor. Okay, so now that it's parkland, all right, 1917 officially a golf course, 1909 officially a park. It's all set up. Now a museum can be built here. Okay. What actually gets built there is the Legion of Honor. And I am an Olympic level shit talker about the Legion of Honor. It is a miracle that I'm not on a no-fly list over there. And I do really like that museum. I enjoy it. They have a great collection. I want to go see this Manet exhibit they got over there, but I got a lot of opinions about how this whole thing was handled from start to modern day, where they still pretend like it's not there. And I understand why and whatever, but this is a fucking podcast about graveyards. So, like, let me have it. All right. The Legion of Honor was originally built intended to be a memorial to the World War I dead of California. Okay. They broke ground in 1921, and it was commissioned and funded by Alma de Bretteville Spreckles, who was also called Big Alma. And she was Big Alma. I have like a love-hate with Big Alma because she was kind of cool, but also she did some dumb rich lady shit, which we're going to get to. She was the wife of sugar baron Adolph Spreckles, who I believe had sugar plantations in Hawaii, right?
Yeah, I think that's correct. They had like a sideline in raising racehorses, but their main money was from sugar plantations.
Yeah. And of course, we know with the sugar plantations and the fruit plantations were the ones who conspired to overthrow the monarchy in Hawaii around this time, right? So,
yes,
okay.
yes.
So when they broke ground in 1921 to build the Legion of Honor, they immediately found 1,500 bodies. Okay. Right off the bat, they start digging, boom, 1,500 graves. We don't need music for this one, but I want you guys to understand what this must have been like, because I've spent a lot of time reading about this and thinking about this. Okay. It's 1921. The cemetery only closed about 20 years ago. Okay. This is not a medieval cemetery, a pilgrim cemetery. This is like where your grandma is buried. Okay. I want everyone to remember that when we talk about what's happening here. Everyone should have known that those bodies were still there. It was only 10, 12 years prior, the city was like putting notices in the paper saying, come get your dead. It was not a fucking secret or mystery that there were 20,000 people still buried there. So now you're a young man. You somehow managed to survive the 1919 flu pandemic, okay? Which, as 1921, it had just happened. Think about fucking COVID and how we're, 6 years on, 6 years on, 5 years on, 5 years on. See what it does to your brain? Scrambles it.
By the time this runs, it will be 6 years.
Oh, you're right. It will be. Thank you, Beth. So 1919 flu pandemic has just happened, and it killed mostly young, healthy people, that flu, okay? It killed several thousand people in San Francisco alone. You are a young man who survived that. You also either managed to avoid the draft or you served in the absolute meat grinder of World War I in Europe, okay? You were either too young or you did serve. But either way, you for sure know someone who served, right? This was like the first mechanized war in human history, and it was really god awful. And this is actually the war that coined the term shell shock. So you either know people who had shell shock or you yourself might have it. Just came out of this pandemic. All this stuff is going on, and you get a good job breaking ground for this expensive, beautiful museum project funded by a famous rich lady in town. So you're like, this is going to be great. You show up to work there, and the first day you hit corpses. I always think about like how much trauma that generation had just gone through. And then you immediately are faced with digging up 1,500 bodies. Contemporary accounts, journalistic accounts, reporter accounts say that the workers didn't want to touch the bones or go near them, which no shit. Also, remember, these are not old burials. Some of these burials could be 20 years old, maybe 30 years old. They're not that old. What they did to manage this is they just bulldozed them all up into a pile, right? So they scraped all the bones out of the way into a pile that later archaeologists will call a charnel heap. It's horrifying.
And just to be clear, they didn't move them anywhere. They just pushed them to the
Mhm.
side and built the museum.
They used a steam shovel to move these bodies out of the way. They didn't collect them and rebury them. They just scooted them out the way.
The laws surrounding the discovery of archaeological remains like this have changed dramatically over the years, and we'll find that out shortly. But there just were no laws protecting this kind of a site from what happened here in the 1920s.
I always think about, the workers, like how just like horrifying that whole situation would have been for everyone, and how it was 1,000% predictable, right? Like,
Yeah, I don't remember with this one specifically, but the newspaper accounts of other construction crews uncovering other cemetery sites, like multiple times, like the men would just run away.
bitch, I would run
They would
away.
leave the area, they would leave screaming, they would refuse to work.
So I will mention briefly while I'm in the middle of talking shit, because we're not done yet. I'm hitting my stride now. Alma Spreckles commissioned a tomb for herself to be located underneath the Rodin sculpture in the entry courtyard or whatever it is, which is hysterical because, like, literally, they just moved 1,500 people out of the way with a bulldozer and then put for her a nice little vault right there under what would be the courtyard of the museum. Now, she's not buried there. It's a long story why. They basically banned burials in the city, which is a topic for another episode, but she was not able to be buried there. But I also kind of wonder if she looked around, maybe read the room a little bit and was like, well, two options. She read the room and was like, oh, I just kicked these people out. Or she was like, oh, there's 20,000 poor people here? Oh, no. Put me in coma, right? Like, nobody told me there would be poor people down there. Excuse me. Let me choose a different cemetery. You guys, Big Alma, by the way, is the statue in Union Square. Beth, how do you describe it? That like obelisk in Union Square that has a golden lady at the top. It's her.
I don't know. I don't know the sculpture very well. I do know that when they were digging, there is a tunnel boring machine in San Francisco for digging subway tunnels that I think is also called Big Alma.
She was called Big because she was tall, you guys. She modeled. She's an interesting lady, but that tomb shit drives me nuts. And it feels so fucking relevant to today, doesn't it? Don't you just like, you're like, oh yeah, that's a story that could be going on right now, right? Back to the Legion of Honor. In 1993, the Legion of Honor did a retrofit project and they excavated down under the museum. Beth, what do you think they found under the museum?
Great idea to dig under the Legion of Honor.
They found 800 bodies, including the charnel heap from the 1921 excavation. This time, because it was the 1990s, they couldn't just be like, bulldoze them out of the way. I'm sure that would have been the preferred option of the people in charge. They had to stop construction. An archaeologist was brought in. They also brought in, city inspectors and officials came out and was like, okay, let's take a look at what we have here. You have to stop construction. We have to map it and look at these remains and also figure out what to do with them that's respectful and not just bulldozing them into crumbs and sticking them in a corner of the lot.
And again, because the laws have changed to prevent what happened in the 20s from continuing to happen.
Good job, laws. They stopped construction. They brought in an archaeologist. Obviously, museum leaders complained about the cost and the delay. But I have to say, I've already said this 100 times. I'm going to say it again. The shit was absolutely to be expected. And it also shows how quickly institutional memory fades because, like, they knocked over the headboards and pretended like it didn't exist. And then, like, 7 years later, it doesn't exist to anyone, right? Till they dig it up. The museum director told the Chronicle that the delays were costing $50,000 a month, money that comes from it's a mix of private funds and probably public funds. And he is quoted as saying, "The finds are interesting, but not exactly King Tut's tomb." Which is why I slander the Legion of Honor, because those are our people. To have no curiosity,
They're our community.
to have absolutely no curiosity about the people who built this town, whose labor and hard work and culture and everything went into forming what we have now, is wild to me. The archaeologists kind of scrambled to analyze the bones in the coffins while they were open. They found that the remains were mostly elderly people in simple redwood coffins, which kind of is like Yerba Buena too, right, Beth? Like,
Yeah, and I'll just interject it as somebody who grew up in Sonoma County, which lost 95% of its redwood trees to logging, like just to have them made into coffins makes me so mad. And it's not even a good material because redwood is so soft that it decays really quickly. Yeah.
all homeowners in San Francisco know that, like, especially in this
Yeah.
climate, like redwood, you can't.
Yeah.
The remains showed fractures, skeletal trauma, arthritis, and other ailments that reflected the hard life of working class San Franciscans of the time. I believe that's a direct quote from your book, Beth. I want to actually give you a chance to jump in and talk about the artifacts that were found in the dig.
Yeah, this is a list that I obtained after my book was published. I didn't even realize that it existed, but this photographer, Richard Barnes, we'll talk about him more in a minute, had gone out to the site and taken pictures of the excavations in the 90s, but he also took some pictures of the artifacts that were found at the same time. I'm even a little bit uncomfortable calling them artifacts, even though
Grave
that's the
goods,
term that I'm
yeah.
using, just because, yeah, these were things that people were buried with because they had some meaning to them. I was going through this list again this week for the episode and getting really emotional at some of the things that they found. So I'm going to read a list of just a few of them. So somebody was buried with a handgun.
You'll see that, you guys. We're going to post a link to the Richard Barnes photographs, and the gun is
Yeah.
in that catalog. It's
Other bullets and shotgun shells.
That's the stuff you're getting emotional about, right, Beth? Because you're like a big 2A girl.
Not quite.
Yeah, okay.
Glass cufflinks. Some of the wooden grave markers, probably from the 1921 steam shovel situation, like they were found in that pile of stuff.
Oh, interesting.
Lots of dentures.
Oh.
And gold fillings.
Mm-hmm.
Crucifixes and rosaries. A lot of coins. In several cases, there were dimes that seemed to probably have been date stamped with the year that the person was buried. So, like, you'd get an 1889 or something like that. Many safety pins. I think people just had them in their clothing to hold things together.
Yeah, probably.
One was found with a green ribbon, hairpins, and a little bit of her hair.
Oh.
And I'm assuming her because of the green ribbon and the hairpins.
Yeah.
One had silver hoop earrings with floral designs, a pair of green jade bracelets, and then those like frog closures that you see on Chinese clothing.
Oh, yeah.
Those remain just where at the base of the neck.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Some purses and gold coins. One had a baby bottle.
Oh.
And then that same one had a leather-bound book and a pillow. Can you imagine, like, burying your loved one with their pillow?
Yeah.
That's kind of sweet.
Kind of like it.
Somebody was buried with their paintbrush.
Oh, an artist.
So probably a painter. Yeah. One had a small Chinese stoneware vessel, jade bracelets, an opium pipe.
Hell yeah.
This is all in one. Red brick, a bamboo vial with Chinese characters, a coin that was in their mouth.
Oh.
Silk that was possibly from a hat or a pillow, a green Peking glass ring, with copper.
Wow, buried in style.
Some of these people just had all their favorite stuff.
Mhm. Yeah.
Some had fruit seeds, and then some others had, like, on top of the coffin lid, there were, like, fruit seeds and twigs that had been burned, so I think that was probably some kind of funerary offering.
Huh.
And then this last one, I really wanna know what was going on. They were buried with some metal scraps, a bag of animal bones, some brown cloth wood fragments, coal fragments, glass fragments,
That's a witch.
glass bottles and jars. Yeah, exactly. A mason jar, a glass stirring stick, a pencil, and some possible tags. Like, what was going on there?
I love it. I don't know. That's really cool.
So that's why I got emotional. I mean, thinking about these people who were buried with their things,
It is.
and then just to have that, like, dug up, and the non-perishable ones are now housed at the Chinese Historical Association of America, which is in Chinatown in San Francisco. I tried to see if we could get in to see them, but most of them are in such fragile shape at this point that they can't really show them to people.
Yeah,
So,
that makes sense.
yeah.
Otherwise, we would have been in there. Would have been tagging along. I'm like, I'll wear some gloves. What do you want me to do? Put a mask on? The artist Richard Barnes, who you mentioned, who's a photographer, an incredible photographer, he documented the excavation. I have in my notes that he was hired to do it. I don't know if that's true or if he just went there to do it.
I don't remember either. I do know that they did have an exhibition of his photographs after the excavation was complete.
Yeah, the photographs are online now on his website. But when I first was doing my research on this, like, God, it had to be like 5 years ago, they were not online. And I had to go buy it on like eBay or something. I paid like $100 for this fucking volume of pictures. Now it's like a prized possession. But of course, now they're all available online. You can go check those out, which I really recommend everybody go look at these pictures because they're very haunting. And the style is that they're black and white and they're like these juxtapositions. So he'll show the outline of the museum. You see the facade of the museum with like the pit dug underneath it from, like distance. And then he shows you the skeletons and things juxtaposed with the art in the museum. And they're very haunting. Especially, I have a description in here since this is a audio format that the skeletons, because they're white, they kind of pop out against the dirt in these black and white photographs. And it's just really visually arresting, to say the least, right?
Yeah, I was going to say one of my favorite photos in there is actually of the skeleton with, like, buttons from their clothing sort of
Lining up where the spine is, right? It's an incredible shot. And when you put those photos and you think about the artifacts, the grave goods that were there, it really humanizes the story of the people who were buried there and then who have been disturbed. I mean, anyway, the remains, because this was 1993 and not the charnel heap heyday of the 1920s, the remains were turned over to the medical examiner's office, and then they were reburied at Skylawn Cemetery in San Mateo. They have a very nice marker there. They have like a whole little section that's very nice, and I've been out to see it. They were at least reburied with dignity, kind of the best thing we can ask for in Poltergeist Town, San Francisco.
I have not actually gone to see that particular monument. I should, but I haven't been there yet. I've seen some of the others, but not that one.
So we're going to fast forward to the present day now, and Beth is going to tell us about the landmarking effort. As far as I understand it, Beth, the fact that there is like a plaque, let's say, is the first time that I'm aware of that they actually admitted that there are people buried out there. I could be wrong, but it seems to me like this is the only admission, and it's like a tacit admission that they never moved those bodies.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, at the time in the newspapers, they were like, we're not moving anybody. But clearly, by the time the Legion of Honor was constructed, there was, I think, this mistaken impression that, well, they must have moved everybody because you wouldn't just leave them there, right?
Right. Who would do that? San Francisco, multiple times. Yeah.
In 2022, the San Francisco Board of Supervisors formally agreed to designate this site as a city landmark. And what that means is a little bit complicated. I'll get into that in a bit. But it started with a local historian that we both know, Woody LaBounty,
Friend of the pod, Woody Labonte.
who knew about the significance of this site, and he put it in the ear of Supervisor Connie Chan. Hey, this would make a good place to designate as a city landmark, and we'll get into why in a minute. So, what landmark designation does, again, this is city level, not state or national. What this does, it just recognizes the historical significance of a place, and somewhat protects it from development or alteration. And one of the reasons that this site was a good candidate is because it's a golf course and is likely to remain so. So they're not going to be like building 10,000 houses out there, although frankly, it would be very good land for housing, and we're in a housing crisis. So it's really complicated.
I reserve judgment on that issue because it's not going to fucking happen. So it's not
Yeah,
as if we're
yeah.
holding up a housing development.
Some other examples of city landmark designations include the rainbow flag at Harvey Milk Plaza in the Castro.
Oh, no way.
So that specific flag, the Mission Dolores that was built in the 1760s by the Spanish missionaries. Some of the murals in the mission have been landmarked.
That's cool.
And the site of the Compton's Cafeteria riot at Turk and Taylor. So it can be all different kinds of places and pieces of land. Some of the criteria include the place must be at least 50 years old.
Check.
It still needs to be largely in the same condition. They could be tricky, and some of the other, like Yerba Buena, for example, that is not at all in the same condition
Right.
as a cemetery
Totally different.
that
Yeah.
it was. It must be culturally or historically significant. And more, the city is looking at places that represent diverse or marginalized communities.
Oh, check, 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 right?
Yeah, exactly. That's why Woody was like, hey, I think City Cemetery ticks all these boxes because it was a graveyard for immigrants, for the poor, all of these communities that don't otherwise get recognition a lot of the time. When I talked to him, he said that it felt like this place really points out how we treat people of different socioeconomic levels. You know, like we said, those who had money were able to move their dead, and these people were not moved.
Yeah, buddy. Even just thinking about the condition of the cemetery at the time, right? And the way that we were able to pretend that it doesn't exist, that's because there was not a community of advocates, or the city didn't care as much. Let's be honest.
Well, and even just the fact that getting a headstone made out of granite or marble costs money, which is why these people had wooden crosses with numbers on them.
Yeah.
And there were, they rotted. There were a couple of fires that moved through the cemetery that destroyed a lot of the markers.
Oh, God.
And so they didn't even have a permanent way to remember who was where, which was also an economic factor. These are mostly people who existed outside the power structure, different ethnic groups, as we've talked about. And all of these things at the time made it easy for the city to ignore the cemetery, but it also created, sort of all those criteria for what they were looking for in landmarks.
Yeah, because in a way, it almost led to them being preserved out there, right? Because everyone else was moved, which we'll talk about in a future episode. Because of the structural conditions that led to them being forgotten about, they were also forgotten about, and they're still resting where they were originally put.
Yeah. I mean, there's a way in which the fact that this place turned into a golf course is a blessing because it kept the land from being developed. I mean, you could still go there and you can still tell that it is a cemetery because of the monuments that are still there. And I'll get into those more in a minute. But, as much as we don't love the idea of people like doing their rounds of golf over the bodies of the early San Franciscans, like there's a way in which that protected this place as a cemetery.
Agreed.
So Woody, as I said, reached out to Connie Chan. She introduced landmark designation to the Board of Supervisors in 2021. This is a long process.
Yeah, just like everything the fuck else in this town, right?
It went to the Historic Preservation Commission, all these different groups, and finally approved September 27th, 2022. And what they said in the designation is that it represents an early incarnation of social safety nets related to burial of the dead for socially, ethnically, and culturally diverse populations of San Francisco. So, like you said, these benevolent associations, you would pay them a little bit of money, a membership, and they would take care of you when you died if you didn't have anyone else.
Yeah. They were like an early form of mutual aid.
Yeah, exactly. Some of the things that are still there that went into the consideration for landmarking include obviously the fact that there are still perhaps 20,000 sets of human remains there.
The bodies.
Yeah.
What remains? 20,000 people?
But there's also some other remnants of things, plantings associated with the section boundaries. So some of the hedges and things that you see when you go there now were actually built later as the plots developed. The benevolent societies built their separate plots and
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
planted things. There are still some like bits of stonework from the
Yes.
different sections. Again, the Kong Chao structure is still there, and it was used as an altar and a furnace. The other monument that's still there is called the Ladies Seamen's Friend Society obelisk. So there was a woman in the city, Rebecca Lambert, who started this foundation to raise money to bury sailors who came here and died without having their own money. And so this very large memorial for that particular plot was erected during the cemetery's operational period, and it is still there. If I recall correctly, this one in Kongchow remained because they were really big,
Yeah,
really
too heavy to move. Yeah,
Yeah.
basically.
Unfortunately, the Friends Society monument it's two parts. It has a cement base and then a zinc obelisk on top. The zinc part fell over in a winter storm in early 2024. It was on the ground for many months while the city tried to find a restoration company that could actually do the work to fix a monument from like
Yeah, I mean,
130 years
yeah,
ago.
exactly. I can't fault the city on this one. That's kind of a weird
Yeah,
thing.
it took a
Yeah.
while. So now the zinc component is being warehoused somewhere and they're going to fix everything up. And it's supposed to be back in the spring of 2026. So maybe not that long after this episode goes out. There were some concerns that landmarking the site could hinder maintenance of the golf course, but it doesn't really appear that that's going to happen. But yeah, some of the golfers were like, the grass is already shabby, the clubhouse needs repairs.
Yeah.
Don't do this if it's going to mess with our ability to continue to play golf here. There are already protections for human remains when they're found, as we saw with the 90s, but this now protects, like, if you find a piece of like stonework from one of these places that was there before, landmarking helps protect that.
Okay. So people can't come in and walk off with.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, landmarking itself does not actually come with any kind of signage or plaque or anything. So, there's a common misconception. It's an invisible designation. If you go to the place, you don't necessarily know that it's been designated as a landmark. However, we were talking about Seacliff earlier. Because of the weird rainstorms that we've had thanks to climate change, Seacliff was flooding year after year after year. And the city decided to do some work around the margins of City Cemetery to install, it's called a bioswale. I'm not going to get into all the specifics, but it just helps the soil drain better.
Okay.
In the process, they dug up some remains.
I knew we were getting to that. See, Cliff,
Yeah.
we know what's under your houses.
Yeah. They were not surprised. They expected
Yeah, of
it.
course.
Because of this find, they were able to create a pathway to put in what's called an interpretive sign. It's basically one of those plastic signs with like a map and some
Yeah.
information about a historic place. This is along Camino del Mar, which is just along the sort of border of the cemetery property. But if you're over there, there is a map of all of the plots and some information about the cemetery. And again, yeah, this is when the city acknowledges, oh, hey, there are some burials here.
Yeah.
They talk about the doctor who ended his life and the bullet in the cranium. I think that was found by this Camino del Mar crew, actually. This is somewhere where you're going to find remains when you dig, anywhere you dig.
That is what I've heard about Seacliff, is that those houses on Camino del Mar, they kind of know that anytime they do like plumbing work or anytime they're digging up the street, that there could be bones out there.
Yeah. I meant to mention this earlier, but in the 1960s, some of the local kids were digging a fort in Lincoln Park. Not a good idea. Near Clement Street and 39th Avenue, they found a headstone, a Jewish headstone that dated back to 1858.
Better headstone than a head, dude.
Yeah. This may have been moved from an earlier Jewish cemetery that was at Gough and Green Streets. And I talk about that cemetery in my book too. As I recall, this headstone may still be in the possession of the San Francisco Public Library.
Yeah, the library has a bunch of headstones.
Yeah, they had it on display for quite a long time. I don't know if they still do. Because of the people who are buried in this site, it is a rich place to do research. There is a researcher, Alex Ryder, who I think we both talked to. He's been slowly working on a project related to some of the dead who had specific identifiable injuries to try to identify them and write about their
So
lives in a
cool.
more,
Yeah.
yeah. As you said, a lot of the remains who are here had different injuries or disabilities, probably from the hard labor of being a lower income worker in San Francisco at the time. A handful of the bones that were uncovered in the 90s excavation are with the San Francisco Medical Examiner's
Oh,
Office.
still?
And you may remember this. There was a student, she goes by Nikki the Archaeologist on
Oh,
Instagram.
yes.
A couple years ago, she did a deep look at the bones that were still at the medical examiner's office to try to figure out, again, what they can tell us about these people. She studied 18 bones that represented 18 different individuals that are housed with the medical examiner. She offers life histories. We'll put her Instagram in the show notes, it's still there. She offers life histories of 5 individuals, and these are like single bones, usually leg bones. So, for one, she had a person's right tibia, which is a shin bone, and it showed a mixture of healed and active lesions from skin ulceration that got infected.
Oh, God.
So, again, no antibiotics.
Can you imagine how much that hurt?
Yeah, I don't want to imagine it,
No,
frankly.
yeah.
Again, we talked about this a little bit in our medical cadavers discussion, but some of the people who were subject to postmortem experimentation are also buried at City Cemetery.
That's where they were supposed to bury them.
Yeah, this is where they were supposed to bury them. And it looks like actually quite a few of the bones that she looked at were part of this because, so for example, this one had 2 postmortem cuts from dissections.
Cut marks, yeah.
Yeah. And in fact, I think all of the bones that she looked at had cut marks on them. But she also looked at isotopes to figure out what kind of foods they were eating.
Mhm.
This one person had previously had a mostly plant based diet, but for whatever reason, started eating more animal protein in the final 10 years of their life. Probably fish and seafood.
Mhm.
You can't get necessarily that specific, but I just love that even this kind of work tells us a little bit more about the people.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, remember that Chinese immigrants ate too many vegetables, and that is why they were susceptible to the bubonic plague. So
That's not how
maybe
that
this
works.
person didn't want to get the plague.
I will say too, it's interesting. This whole site, you could just go on forever about it. Like, it's a former cemetery with 20,000 people still buried in it. It has a museum that is also a memorial to the World War I dead, but it also
Layers, baby.
it
Yeah.
also has a memorial for the Holocaust.
Yes.
Just kind of around the corner from the museum. And there's also a little one that I think is for Korean War veterans. So, yeah, there's a lot of a memorialization here. And I'm glad that now that it's landmarked and there's a sign, one of those memorials is for the dead that are actually buried here. I have really mixed feelings about excavation and study, treating them as sources of information about the past versus letting them just be in the ground, like letting them be.
Yeah, I think that's something like a lot of people who do this kind of work struggle with, right? I mean, where I land is that like if they're going to take them out for whatever reason, we might as well get some data on it before we put them back in.
Yeah.
But
I do note that I hope that the medical examiner's office eventually reburies those bones, maybe with the rest of them that were relocated.
Well, I mean, they're still waiting to rebury those bones from that medical pit too, Beth.
I mean, by rights, all of these people should be buried back in City Cemetery, but you can't because burials are not
Right.
legal. But one nice thing that has come out of the landmarking process, Connie Chan went to the Chinese community organizations that are the descendants of the original groups that helped organize this site. She went to them, and in the process, they became interested again in honoring the dead that are still at City Cemetery. So they started during their annual autumn festival and like bringing food and burning incense and burning paper money. There's usually a broom out there, so whoever stops by can sweep out the Conchow monument.
People leave flowers and stuff out there too. It's pretty nice.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. They leave flowers. I love that this has again become a place to take care of the ancestors.
Yeah, remembrance. Yeah.
Like I said, I mean, City Cemetery is just a really complicated, interesting place to think about and go for a walk. You just have to dodge any golf balls that fly your way.
And ghosts. Dodge the ghosts.
Dodge the ghosts. I mean, one thing that I guess isn't clear, if you're in that underground gallery at the Legion of Honor, you're surrounded by graves.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I wrote about this on my blog when I was writing about the cemetery. We looked at that site to get married at 2005. It was a long time ago, you guys. What was interesting at the time is they would not let you have the ceremony inside. You could have everything else inside, but the ceremony had to be out by that fountain. And we got married in February and it was cold as fuck. I was like, there's no way we're doing this. But like looking back, the party would have been in that underground gallery where you are really surrounded by the dead. I mean, there's layers and layers and layers on this, right? You are in the museum, you're looking at, you know, these cultural artifacts from dead people from a long time ago, right? Everything in that museum was created, those people are no longer alive, right? It goes all the way back to like classical antiquity. So there's layers to it.
Yeah, when
right?
I went out there researching for my book, I actually went and asked one of the docents. I said, "Do you know where these grave goods went? Because I know that they're somewhere." And she didn't even know there was a cemetery.
No, dude, they don't like to publicize that.
They actually stocked copies of my book, and once the book came out and I came back to talk to them, they were like, "Oh yeah, now we know there's a cemetery here."
Oh,
so I
they
feel like
stock it? Oh,
Yeah.
I take back my slander.
I think there's still probably room for a little, but I mean, I love the idea that people who work there know where it is. They know what their surroundings are.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, I joke, right? This is part of the way that I interpret the world around me. My dream would be for them to acknowledge that and incorporate it into the offerings at the museum. That it's not just a memorial to ancient cultures and cultures from across the oceans and things like that. That actually, like here in San Francisco, there's like really important cultural material on that site still.
Yeah.
That's our history and something we should be proud of. It's not something that needs to be buried or ignored or kept under wraps. Like it's something we should embrace and be proud of as San Franciscans. Like these are these are the founders of our city.
Yeah. They are our community ancestors, not our biological ancestors, but our community ancestors. And, you know, I did a online talk with Amy Shea, who we interviewed in an earlier episode, and we were talking about the fact that San Francisco does not do a regular memorial for its indigent unclaimed dead now. And somebody in the chat actually recommended doing a ceremony at the Legion of Honor, which is the sort of old burial ground for these people. And I kind of love that. I don't know if they'd ever go for it, but I keep thinking about
maybe
it.
you could do it at Kong Chow instead, because that's like technically public property out there, right?
Yep.
Okay.
I mean, the whole thing is, but.
Yeah. Well, you guys, thanks for being here on our little journey through our favorite cemetery. I'm going to keep saying it's my favorite cemetery. But I bet that this is like a special place to us. And we both have done like a lot of thinking and research and talking about this site. And it was really great to be able to share everything that we care about.
Yeah, and because it's public, I mean, people should just go out there and take a walk.
See it.
Look at the land and try to imagine how it used to be.
I don't know why they're not calling us podcasters to set up their fucking exhibits.
I would love that.
Call me, guys. Oh, what do you have, like professionals or something? Curators? We can curate.
Dead Reckoning, the podcast where death isn't the end of the story. Hosted by Courtney Minnick and Beth Weingartner, produced by Carolyn Kissick and Here Lies a Story, with art design by Dante Silliman. Our music is Act Calm by OTE. Please rate, review, and subscribe to Dead Reckoning on your favorite podcast platform, or email us at show@deadreckoningpodcast.com. You can follow Courtney at Here Lies a Story on Instagram and at Courtney Minnick on Blue Sky, and see more of her work at HereLiesAStory.com. You can follow Beth at Beth Weingartner on Instagram, Blue Sky, and Mastodon, and see more of her work at BethWeingartner.com.